Welcome back to my channel. Things just got absolutely insane in the WWE, and I need to break it down for you all. Seth Rollins has snapped, and in the most shocking backstage incident ever, he delivered a brutal beating that has left Paul Heyman hospitalized. This was not just another scripted moment in wrestling, this was real, raw, and intense. Seth, the architect and visionary who has been pushed to his absolute limits by Paul Heyman's manipulations over the past several months, finally got his revenge in the most violent and personal way we've ever seen. This wasn't just a fight, it was an explosion of pent-up frustration, rage, and a thirst for justice. Let's break it down. What makes this even worse is that Seth didn't just attack Paul behind the scenes. He completely destroyed him in front of other WWE officials, wrestlers, and, worst of all, in front of cameras that captured every brutal moment of Paul Heyman getting exactly what he deserved. Some might try to write this off as another staged angle with fake blood and pulled punches, but if you've seen the leaked footage online and heard about Paul Heyman's real injuries, you know this was no scripted performance. This crossed the line between entertainment and something much more dangerous, and the consequences of this assault are only just starting to unfold. Stick with me because what led to this explosive moment, how Seth carried out his revenge, and the aftermath of this incident are all going to leave you speechless. Now, Seth's revenge didn't come out of nowhere. This was the culmination of months of relentless torment by Paul Heyman. It all started about 6 months ago when Paul Heyman created his faction, The Vision. Right from the start, he set his sights on Seth Rollins as their main target. Week after week, Seth was subjected to psychological warfare. The Vision would interfere in Seth's matches, cost him opportunities, and make his life a living hell. But this animosity between Seth and Paul goes back even further back to 2014 when Seth Rollins was under Paul Heyman's management. At that time, Seth was the authorities' golden boy and Paul managed him briefly. But that relationship ended when Paul Heyman chose Brock Lesnar as his full-time client, leaving Seth in the dust. This abandonment left a lasting mark on Seth, and Paul has used that insecurity to torment Seth ever since. The tension between the two has been building for years, and it finally reached its breaking point. 3 months ago, Seth Rollins had a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship in a match against Gunther, but in typical Paul Heyman fashion, he orchestrated interference that cost Seth the title. Drew McIntyre, acting on Heyman's orders, came in to sabotage the match, and that loss sent Seth into a spiral. He became obsessed with getting revenge, specifically targeting Paul Heyman, who Seth saw as the puppet master behind everything. 2 months ago, Seth challenged Paul to a match at Survivor Series, but Paul, being the coward he is, turned Seth down. Instead of accepting the challenge, Paul sent Brock Lesnar to completely destroy Seth in a one-sided squash match. That match left Seth with cracked ribs and out of action for 3 weeks. While Seth was recovering, Paul took every opportunity to mock him, calling him weak, telling him he should have stayed down. This only fueled Seth's rage even more. Last month, Seth returned to the WWE and immediately went after the Vision once again, but every time he got close to Paul, the Vision was there to protect him. Seth couldn't get his hands on the wise man of the faction, no matter how hard he tried. His frustration reached new heights. You could see it in his promos, the cracks in his voice, the wild look in his eyes. Seth was no longer the calm, collected visionary, he was unhinged, desperate for payback. And then, 2 weeks ago, Paul Heyman crossed a line that pushed Seth over the edge. During an emotional promo by Seth, where he was talking about his career and legacy, Paul interrupted him with a video package. But this wasn't just any video, it was personal footage of Seth's family. Paul showed clips of Seth's wife, Becky Lynch, their daughter, RU, and everything that Seth holds dear. Paul then threatened that if Seth didn't back off, the Vision would make Seth's family their next target. That was the moment when things turned from just bad blood to something truly personal. In wrestling, you can threaten a man's career, his titles, even his pride, but you never, ever involve his family, especially his children. That was the moment when Seth's rage shifted from anger to something far darker. Seth's face went from furious to absolutely murderous. He tried to attack Paul right there in the ring, but security held him back, and Paul, the coward that he is, laughed as he escaped. That moment, with Seth looking like a caged animal while Paul mocked him, became iconic. You could see that Seth was ready to explode. Last week, Seth delivered the most intense promo of his career. He looked directly into the camera and said, "Paul, I don't care about my career anymore. I don't care about championships. I don't care about getting suspended or fired. You threatened my family. You made this personal. And I promise you this, the next time I see you, there won't be security to save you. There won't be the Vision to protect you. I'm going to make you pay for every single thing you've done." That promise, the conviction in Seth's voice, was bone-chilling. And then came tonight. On Raw, Paul Heyman opened the show, doing what he does best, running his mouth. Surrounded by the Vision, Gunther, Drew McIntyre, Brock Lesnar, and the rest. Paul gloated about how Seth had become obsessed with him. Paul taunted Seth, saying, "You've let me get inside your head, you've let me break you, and now you're making threats you can't back up because you'll never get close enough to touch me." What Paul didn't know was that Seth was already in the building. He had arrived hours before everyone else, hiding backstage and waiting for the perfect moment. While Paul was in the ring running his mouth, Seth was preparing for what was about to happen. The show went on as usual for about 90 minutes. Matches happened, segments played out, but backstage, Seth was stalking the Vision. Cameras caught glimpses of him lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. Seth's opportunity came when the Vision broke up after a segment. Paul, feeling safe because his protection was nearby, went to his private locker room, thinking he was safe. That was his mistake. As Paul entered the room and closed the door, Seth emerged from around the corner. With a terrifying calm, Seth approached Paul's door. No music, no announcement, just Seth on a mission. Seth kicked the door open and the crash echoed through the hallway. Paul spun around, his confident expression turning to terror as he saw Seth standing there. "Seth, wait, we can talk about this," Paul begged, backing up, trying to find an escape. But Seth had already locked the door behind him. There was no escape. What happened next was captured on security cameras inside the locker room, and when that footage leaked online, it shocked the world. Seth grabbed Paul by his suit jacket and threw him into the lockers with a loud clang. Paul crumpled to the floor, looking hurt, but Seth wasn't done yet. He picked Paul up and hit him with a knee to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. Then, Seth grabbed Paul's head and slammed it into the locker door 3 times. You could see Paul's legs start to give way and blood began to trickle from his forehead. This wasn't a wrestling match. This wasn't a staged angle. This was a real, unhinged beating. "You threatened my family," Seth screamed at Paul while continuing the assault. "You said you'd go after my wife, my daughter." His voice was raw with emotion. Seth wasn't holding back. He grabbed Paul and threw him across the room, sending him crashing into a table that collapsed under Paul's weight. Production equipment scattered everywhere, and the noise was so loud that it attracted attention. You could hear people banging on the locked door, shouting, "Seth, open the door, Seth." WWE officials, security, other wrestlers, they all tried to get in, but Seth wasn't stopping. He picked Paul up again and Paul was barely conscious, blood streaming down his face. Seth hit his finishing move, the stomp, right there on the concrete floor. Paul's head bounced off the ground with a sickening thud, and that was it. Paul wasn't moving anymore. Seth stood over him, breathing heavily, looking down at the broken body of the man who had tormented him for so long. And then, Seth did something chilling. He smiled, not a happy smile, but a satisfied, almost peaceful smile. He had gotten his revenge. The door finally burst open and security flooded in, followed by WWE officials and other wrestlers. They rushed to Paul, who was lying in a pool of his own blood. One official checked Paul's pulse and started shouting, "Get medical." The panic in his voice was real. Seth didn't resist. He raised his hands, allowing security to grab him and escort him out. But as he passed by Paul's motionless body, Seth looked down at him and calmly said, "That's what happens when you threaten my family." Medical staff rushed in with a stretcher, working frantically on Paul, who was seriously injured. The Vision members Gunther, Drew and Brock arrived.